give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending, the horror sideshow of Alternate Ending. I am your co-host, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is Tim Brayton. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing so good. How are you doing?
Well, Tim, you inspired me, so...
I like to think I inspire so many people every day.
You really do. But I saw how much fun you had when you got COVID last Thanksgiving, and I was like, I should give it a shot this year.
Oh yeah, those Thanksgiving COVIDs, those are the best COVIDs.
Uh-huh.
I know what I'm talking about because I've had it multiple times. So
Yeah, no, it was a delight. Yeah, I had to, well, actually, I can be proud that my branch of COVID ended with me. I destroyed it. It shall be no more. I did not pass it along to anyone. In my family, we postponed our Thanksgiving, and we had it last night, and that was fun. But I've been just without human contact for basically since we recorded the last Bride of Alternate Ending until now. So it's been a wild time.
I appreciate that I am the only person you talk to anymore. I feel good about that.
Yeah, you were the only person who informs my worldview. I assume that everyone in the world feels and acts the way that you do.
I also feel that way. So so good. No, I'm very sorry to hear that. How are you doing?
I'm a lot better now. I mean, it was I would classify it as a mild to moderate case, but it was definitely, it was not one of the mild ones where it's like, I didn't even notice. Reader, I noticed. It was miserable.
Yeah.
But it was fine. Like, I still had my taste and my smell, so I could have Thanksgiving related foods on Thanksgiving.
That's good. Yeah, my sense is that the COVID where you lose your taste has been more or less fully priced out of the market, so to speak.
Well, that's great. No major cough either, although warning for people listening to this, I have a lingering tiny cough that comes in the morning and the evening, which has been just a delight. So I'm gonna try not to be super loud during this recording. And I never had a fever, but I don't think I have the capacity to be warm under any circumstances.
That's fair. Fevers blow. I'm glad you didn't. Although actually, I don't think I had a fever either. So.
Well, that's good. I was joking. I have had a fever before. I know what it's like, and it sucks.
Yes.
But my internal body temperature is always about at least 1 full degree below what humans are supposed to be.
Wonderful.
So the height that I reached was 98.1 through this entire process, which...
Good God Almighty.
Yeah, that's as high as I ever got. But no, it was like I did spend a night where I was so stuffed up it felt like my nose had been cask of Amontillado, just bricked up, nothing getting through. It was not fun, but we're back. I did spend some of my sick time watching Night of the Comet, which we're discussing today.
We sure are. Getting ourselves in the adjacent to but not exactly Christmas spirit.
Exactly. So what we put up on our poll for all of our Patreon cohorts is it's beginning to look a little like Christmas Slate, which is horror movies that are set in the Christmas time period but aren't explicitly Christmas movies. It's not foregrounding as a concept. Like, I'd say obviously Gremlins is a Christmas movie in many ways. It has all the trappings and it's about Christmas in a way that these movies aren't.
Right. And I would at this point name drop Die Hard, but I don't feel like that's a landmine we just want to start jumping up and down on if we don't have to. So
yeah, no, that's fair. It's all complicated, but these are Christmas movies.
These are unambiguously not Christmas movies. They are movies that happen to be set at Christmas time.
Yes, but insofar as... So I remembered that Night of the Comet was set during Christmas from the last time I had watched it. But this rewatch, there are some very explicit Christmas moments that I think work really well and highlight what they're doing. But it's still not the point of the movie.
I would be curious, in maybe as we go through it, hearing your thoughts on those, because I wasn't watching for the purpose of, what are the scenes where they talk about Christmas? I am not sure that I noticed anything other than the opening narration that felt like Christmas was being used as anything other than an incidental feature.
There's one scene other than that opening narration, but we should get into the plot a little bit.
We should get into the plot a little bit.
The opening narration actually, I mean, obviously this came later, but it was very reminiscent to me of, I forgot it had a kind of Little Shop of Horrors intro, just like, yeah.
It did. It was, I got that vibe too. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, very, very nice. A big booming narration over a shot of space because, so guess what? There is a comet.
There's a comet.
It is a comet is coming towards the Earth that has not been seen since the time of the dinosaurs when, guess what? There was a mass extinction event. Something happened there.
What do you suppose happened, Brennan?
Well, it seems like the dinosaurs all got turned into dust by the comet, because...
That seems like a very reasonable possibility.
And then some of the dinosaurs got turned into weird zombies.
That seems to be the implication that we must assume was true.
Yeah, oh my god, I need that prequel, actually. But yeah, so there's this big comet. Everyone in the world is very excited about the comet, and basically anyone who isn't inside a steel-lined room of some kind either turns into dust. I mean, I'd say it seems like 96% are turned into dust, and then the rest are these kind of like the crazies, violent zombie kind of characters.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 98%. We see what, probably a dozen-ish zombies throughout in LA.
Yes. It definitely seems like the number of people who just become piles of dust settled into clothing is quite high, and the number of people who become zombies is quite low. And I will say, I like this movie a lot. I want to just foreground that. One of the specific things that sort of put a wall of frustration between me and this movie is that I find it unclear why zombies. Other than, hey, why not zombies? But I don't know what about this movie would not have functioned just as satisfying if it only turned you into red dust.
Yeah, because the zombie thing, they definitely could have just done the Romero universe thing of the most dangerous thing in this world is other people.
Exactly. Like the main zombie sequence, which is, speaking of Romero, when they are holed up in a shopping mall and are trying to defend it against a gang of like bikers, essentially. There is no earthly reason that those people needed to be zombies.
Yeah, because they can still speak, they're still cruel, and they're cruel in a way that feels right as to what these people would be doing in the apocalypse.
Exactly. And I don't know why zombies, and I am a little bit annoyed, and world building is not this movie's thing. I don't get how the zombies... I don't understand why sometimes dust, but sometimes zombies. Like, that doesn't seem to have been explained unless there was a throwaway line that I missed.
Oh, no, there wasn't.
Okay.
It's just the comet. It's inexplicable.
It is inexplicable.
Yeah, anyway, so the characters that we're focusing on here, the people who have survived this comet, we have Regina Belmont, played by the Apple's Catherine Mary Stewart.
I had this vague, weird sense that I'd seen her before, and I just figured she was like, oh, well, she's probably a character actress who's been in a trillion things. And when I looked it up afterwards and saw that she had played BB, I wanted to just go back and rewatch the entire film with that new crucial piece of context.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, the Apple. What a time. Yeah, so she works at, well, specifically the El Rey movie theater in Los Angeles, which I don't know if they shot in the interior of the El Rey or not for the lobby sequence, because it looked like a much jankier theater than I think the El Rey is, but maybe it was jankier in 1984.
I was going to say, in 1984, I'm thoroughly willing to believe that the El Rey was very janky.
Yeah, so unclear on that, but there is a lot of exterior, genuine LA photography going on here. Yeah, anyway, so she... Yes.
I mean, this is a movie that did not have the luxury of money allowing it to be anything other than genuine LA photography.
Yeah, I think for me, because I grew up in Southern California, I have a very specific kind of like heart connection to a movie like this, but I'm glad that sense of location still worked.
It did, and in a weird way, because like uniquely among cities for the obvious reason. LA, somewhat in the movies at least, it doesn't feel like there can be such a thing as the place of LA. Like it feels like the city that is not a real city in a way, I think, in a lot of movies. And I think that is both true here and it is useful here.
Yeah, and I do think that the parts of LA that they used, largely out of necessity, are areas of LA that you see less in movies because they're the less iconic parts.
Right.
So it does feel more like an on-the-ground thing.
Yeah. But no, it definitely does the trick that post-apocalyptic movies love to do, where it's just like, we're going to film here during the 45-second window where no one will be driving or walking, so it will look completely barren and empty, and got it done really, really well. It reminded me a lot of The Omega Man, which I believe is also set in LA.
Oh, I have not seen that one yet. I've been meaning to. I love the I Am Legend novella. But yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, so Regina Belmont, she spent the night in the projection booth at the El Rey with a young projectionist that she is, amorous with. One of the only other survivors, luckily, is her younger sister, Samantha Belmont, played by, I'd say, like, kind of B-tier scream queen Kelly Maroney. She was in Chopping Mall. She was also in Fast Times at Ridgemont High as a cheerleader in a smaller role. So basically, it's these two Valley girls against this big empty world in LA. We also eventually meet Hector Gomez, played by Robert Beltran of Star Trek Voyager.
Which is wild for me because I've been watching Star Trek Voyager.
So, yeah, okay. So, is he a big deal?
As in an actor in general or in Star Trek specifically?
I guess in Star Trek specifically.
So in Star Trek specifically, there was a kind of notorious tiff between him and the producers. I'm going to go on a slight tangent because it's Star Trek. But basically, Star Trek Voyager had the largest ensemble cast of, I believe, any Star Trek ever, certainly any Star Trek of the first 5 Star Trek series. It also had probably, in aggregate, the least talented writing staff of any of the first, at least 4 Star Trek series. And they ran into a problem, certainly by the end of the 3rd season, where they could only really write well for 2 of the main characters. And so, rather than learn how to write for the other characters, they basically were just, well, what if we only give the good characters episodes and the bad characters we'll just kind of hang out in the background of the good characters episodes.
Cool.
And Robert Beltran was not the only victim of that process. He was not the victim who had the worst of that process. He is, however, the person who was the most vocal in the press about how he knew that's what was going on and it pissed him off.
Ooh.
So Beltran is probably specifically the actor who was most qualified above and beyond what Voyager was giving him, which was nil, essentially.
I did not know. I have not seen any Star Trek series, although I know the gist of them.
So there's planes in space.
Great. Wonderful. But what's interesting about this movie is that Robert Beltran gets top billing in the opening credits.
I saw that, and that is both weird on the merits and weird in that I cannot imagine he was actually the biggest name of the 3.
Yeah, I don't know, because the thing that I was looking at what he did before this. I mean, he was in Eating Raoul. He was Raoul.
Ah, there you go.
But that film, at least at this point, is a cult movie and not like a big, huge.
I mean, Eating Raoul probably has a higher prominence here and now than it ever did because it is now an entry. It's a member of the Criterion Collection, but it is not like a canonical work. Like it is a cult classic, and the cult is not big.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So that's really, really peculiar because he's definitely the third banana here. He is a trucker who kind of joins up with Samantha and Regina, and they do kind of catfight over him a little bit, but he and Regina kind of develop a romance over the course of the film. We also discover that there is an underground cabal of scientists who knew that the comet was coming, but they did accidentally get partially exposed to the comet because they left the vent open.
Yes, which was one of the more, I think, one of the satiric jabs that landed better, I think, was that even your evil cabal is still ultimately like shitty at what they're doing.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, so they're basically trying to kidnap survivors to develop a serum out of their blood to prevent this kind of slow decay process that the comet has ignited in them.
Yeah, so basically if we are to trust the shadowy cabal, and I'm not confident that we can, you either immediately become red dust, immediately become a zombie, or you will become one of those two things, and it's not really specifically clarified which, but I assume we're meant to understand that you'll become a zombie within like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. I think... See, okay, so here's what I got. I got that you were meant to turn into dust for the most part, because I think, what the key scientist that we see who has her doubts about the way that the rest of the Cabal is treating people is played by Mary Woronov, also of Eating Raoul, but also, you know, all kinds of cult.
Also
film.
being Mary Woronov.
Yeah, cult film legend. But yeah, so she said something about, like, you know, in just 3 days we're all going to be dust. But then one of the guys...
That's true, she did.
Definitely became a zombie. So it's still up in the air. But anyway, so that's kind of all the players we have. And it's mainly this... It's a bit shaggy, I would say. It's mainly this apocalyptic comedy about what are these Valley Girls going to do in the apocalypse? What does it mean to them, and how are they going to handle it, basically?
Essentially. And I'm actually going to push back a little bit against shaggy, I think. It is not the world's tightest screenplay, and I think that there are certainly moments, for me particularly in the middle, although I think we could make a debate for a lot of scenes, but I think there are scenes that are not really... They're not doing their work relative to the amount of time they have on screen. But I would say in general, this is not a hangout movie. This is a movie that it wants to get someplace, and it does not waste really a lot of time in getting there. It's 95 minutes long, and, you know, that's not a long movie, that's not a super short movie, but I don't think it dithers, really. It dithers a little bit in the middle, but it knows where it wants to be, and it's going to race there.
You know what? I think you're right. I just think where it wants to be is kind of random.
Sure, no, I'll spot you that. But I would also say it felt like it moved with a purpose towards its random destination.
Yes. Yeah, it's a peculiar movie in so many ways.
I mean, it's a peculiar movie in that it is at least all 3 of a teensploitation film. It is very, very clearly living in the shadow of 1983's Valley Girl.
Yes.
It is a low-budget post-apocalypse zombie movie. And it is a Reagan-era satire. And there's no reason these 3 things can't live together, and they in fact do live together, but it's a movie with a lot on its mind.
Yes,
is what I mean to say.
Which is really interesting, because this kind of, you know, like, biker, zombie, Valley Girl, LA apocalypse, it has a much sharper eye on what it's doing than many films of this budget level really should. I
will say 2 things that are entirely unrelated to each other. First, it is a movie that cast Mary Woronov, which means that it is a movie that's got at least a little bit of, okay, I know what's what. And apparently that, by the way, was Beltran's suggestion. Like, the producers had not yet cast that role, and he was like, I know this woman who'd be incredibly good in it, and sure enough, she was.
You should go into casting.
But I feel like Woronov's movies in general tend to be a little bit more sharp-edged, a little bit more clear-eyed. They have a little bit of a, like... We're not just... I don't want to say she's like an art film actress, but by the standards of, like, B-movie legends, she tends to accrue ones that are more artful and thoughtful. Yeah. Has been my experience. And she was in Eating Raoul. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and wasn't she kind of in the Warhol camp for a while?
She was.
Yeah, because she kind of has straddled the line between Warhol and Corman in a lot of ways.
Right, exactly, which I don't know if there's any other human for which that is true, and it is a cool thing for her to have done. So the Mary Woronov of it sort of, I think, is the indication of where this movie's priorities lie. The other thing I wanted to say, simultaneously, it is smarter and more biting than the unaccountably vast majority of films that we would feel compared compelled to compare it to both generically and, as you say, budgetarily, while I think also not being as sharp satirically as it fancies itself to be.
I think those are very definitely two distinctive measures. Yeah, it's interesting because the movie is, at least the way that it is pitched, is this, like Valley Girls versus the Apocalypse thing, which is what it's doing for some of the time. But it does have it paints the characters of Regina and Samantha Belmont in these shaded ways that prevent them from becoming caricatures and allow them to be characters and smart in a lot of ways, even though their value system has been they still have this very narrow value system, but they're not dumb and they're not silly.
That is entirely true. They are neither of those things.
And they're very capable in a lot of ways. It's just that the things that they desire don't always square with the things that they probably should be doing right now. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like this movie. It does feel like when you look at it as, an aesthetic object to analyze, it's this really sprawling thing that's kind of hard to even know where to begin. It is.
Again, it has a lot on its mind. It is really stretching a budget as far as it can go. And I think a lot of what it's doing is cool in a way that, like, have these ingredients ever been assembled in this way? And I don't believe the answer is yes. I think there's something so very specific about the, like, moment it enters into pop culture. Again, it's very much post Valley Girl. I don't think it can possibly be post Repo Man, but it feels like it and Repo Man are sort of drawing from the same well in a way. And, there's this specific moment in teen culture that is really a weird, unique moment in teen culture. Like the Valley Girl moment, I think, has no analogs anywhere else and doesn't really lead into anything else. And, like, taking that and adding it to this extremely good faith effort to make a very weird version of a post-apocalypse movie. And it is I think I will happily say, one of the most striking low-budget apocalypse movies I have ever seen. And there's one specific thing it's doing that we'll talk about, I'm sure, later on. But just in general, like, it is weirdly bleak in a way that I think really works for it, and it really does make that, like, LA is completely barren vibe. It never stops being something effective for it to pull on. So the fact that you're just combining these two specific things already creates such a unique thing that already feels like it's so big,
Yeah, exactly. And let's drill down on that bleakness a little bit, just to find somewhere to land. But yeah, there is this very profound sense of emptiness around this movie that the characters interact with as far as their minds can allow them to without shattering. Like, there's a really, really affecting monologue that Kelly Maroney gives when they're hanging out, sitting on the hood of this cop car after practicing shooting the guns that they have acquired, where she starts doing this monologue about this guy she had a crush on at school, and this girl who was worried about doing her arithmetic exam, and the fact that they're all gone and the things that they cared about don't matter anymore. And it's heart-wrenching. Like,
it is.
I think this movie is profoundly affecting in many different ways in many different scenes. Like, the scene where Catherine Mary Stewart says, "It's Saturday morning. Where are the children? Why can't we hear them?"
That was specifically one of the things I was thinking about. This movie, and some of this is not spoiler and some of this is, this movie's willingness to endanger children, or not even endanger children, but, like, acknowledge that children have died.
Yeah.
Is to its credit and is really genuinely upsetting, I think.
Yeah, I think it has this emotional center that is really powerful in a way that is completely unexpected, both for the log line of, like, what this thing is and how it is sold, but also just for what it should be capable of. And also, to that end, I think Mary Woronov is just so terrific in this movie.
She is, and it's this perfect alchemical reaction where she's obviously giving the film's best performance. Like I don't know how you could argue otherwise. But she's not overwhelming the film. She's not like, sometimes when you have one actor who's like a lot more seasoned than the rest of the cast, as she is, and who's a better talent than the rest of the cast, sometimes they swoop in, they do their little small cameo-ish thing, and they just completely break the film. She does not do that. Like, she meets the film at the level it's on and just elevates its whole thing. It's a really special performance, I think. I'm kind of obsessed with what Mary Woronov is doing in this film.
Yeah,
because it is just incredibly sad.
Yeah, and it's really small. Because she's giving the performance of a woman who is already given up.
Yeah, she's so tired looking. She just feels tired in this movie. And her arc is basically, it's a very standard arc. It's like, she's the member of the mad science crew who's like, is our mad science in fact mad? And so like, it's a stock character doing stock things, but you can see where it's coming from in her performance because she is so clearly fully embraced this sort of nihilism and hopelessness, and it's really very affecting. Again, I don't want to get too deep into spoilers quite yet, but I really, Woronov's performance did a lot to sort of help me clarify what this movie's game was.
Yeah, and it's playing it very well for a lot of times. It's just, I think it's maybe a little scatterbrained because it has so much that it's trying to do.
Sure.
But I there's not a lot I can point to here where it's like, oh, that is bad and I don't like it.
I don't have too many things. I have isolated lines of dialogue I can point to. The one thing that I think structurally the film made a mistake, it follows Robert Beltran's character to San Diego because he wants to find out what's going on with his family there. That is a weird little parenthesis in the film. And tonally, I don't get what's going on with that sequence because it feels like he learns that horrible things are happening, and he is met by a zombie boy, like a young boy who is now a zombie. And this feels like it is meant to be a kind of really sobering, horrific beat, but then it immediately turns into this kind of like wacky
he's like
moment. It's the instant that part resolves.
Yeah, it's like a very quippy chase scene that's like slapsticky.
Right, and like to analogize it to Dawn of the Dead, because oh golly Moses, does this movie invite you to analogize it to Dawn of the Dead in so many ways, large and small. That would be, I think, this film's equivalent to the moment where Ken Foree is mourning his dead buddy in Dawn of the Dead. And we're not getting the mourning. Like, we don't get the beats that Dawn of the Dead has, where he's just kind of alone in his thoughts. We never see Beltran really being alone in his thoughts that way. And it feels like that's a mistake.
You know what? I agree with you there. Because I don't think it's Beltran's fault. I think he's not given an opportunity to do so.
The script has not written that scene.
Yeah.
Or, not the script. Tom Eberhardt has not written that script.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because that character never really gets his moment.
He doesn't. And it feels like that's what was supposed to be his moment. And if you're going to take the chunk out of the momentum to visit San Diego, I need it to pay off, and I don't think it does. I feel like it's less paying off than it's more resolving, well, we gave this character this conflict, and if we don't do something with it, he'll still have that conflict open.
Yeah.
Rather than, what are we going to learn about Hector from this beat?
Yeah, Hector is much more of a cipher than any of the other two, or any of the other major characters in the movie.
And I don't think it matters that he isn't as defined a character as the sisters. I think that would be very natural to the story this film is telling. I feel like they ran away from an opportunity to tweak that a little bit.
Yes.
That's sort of where I'm at.
And while we're here, there is a part that I think is actively not to my taste, which is the double nightmare sequence where Samantha has two nightmares that end with zombie jump scares that are nested, which I think is a very, very silly thing to do anyway in any movie. But it's another just kind of digression that they take where it's like, you're just kind of wasting our time.
That one definitely, the second nightmare jump scare made no sense.
No.
It was like, okay, why are you doing this? Like, I don't know if it would have been better, maybe if that's a runner, like she keeps having zombie nightmares. Maybe if they just do 1, maybe if they just do 0, I don't know. But I agree with you, that didn't land for me.
Yeah, and look, I'm against that kind of hacky nightmare sequence anyway. It felt very much like, well, we need 3 more minutes in the movie, rather than exploring her psychologically.
That's fair. I think that this movie is willing enough to do silly things that I don't mind the hackiness. I agree with you that it is hacky. But I think, we've been talking about this as, oh, it's a bleak movie, oh, it's a satiric movie, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. It's also a goofy movie.
That is
like,
true.
This is not a movie that is trying to do the Romero thing of just, like, confronting you with the depravities of humanity. It's still Valley Girls fight an army of zombies. Like, that is what this movie is.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Like, especially, there's a very slapsticky sequence in the mall where they're fighting that biker gang, and she's like dropping a TV from the floor above them and throwing shoes at them, and it's that is also a mode that this movie's doing, and in many ways is doing quite well, but not all of them.
That is fair. You've reminded me actually of my one other substantial complaint, and it's not even that substantial of a complaint. The actor playing the sort of like featured biker zombie.
Oh yeah.
I found his performance very, very annoying.
Yeah, it's very annoying. It's off-putting. It's
and like I get what they're going for. It's meant to be off-putting. He's kind of the sleazy shit bucket who is also now a zombie, which makes him even sleazier.
Uh-huh.
But it's just like it's such a gaudy caricature of that.
Yeah, I don't mind that performance quite so much, but it's definitely the lowest performance of the main featured players for sure.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so there are ups and downs with that. I think the goofiness shines the best when it is kind of placed into that specificity of these are Valley Girls, like, and not just like the general concept of the Valley Girl. Like, literally, we're in the Valley. These are people from LA. Like, I really, really love the line. I think the line that kind of combines everything the movie is doing really well is when Samantha says, like, do you think this is happening everywhere? Like, in Burbank or somewhere?
That was the exact specific line I was thinking about when you said that they're very, like, specifically Valley Girls, the Burbank line. I mean, when isn't Burbank a good punchline? But it was a particularly good punchline here.
It's really good because that's the farthest place she can think of,
Right.
But it also highlights, just how empty it is and how she hasn't processed it yet. It's doing there's a lot of work or a lot of weight being put on that line, and it holds it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, you had something?
I had something I was going to say, but now it's slipped my mind, so go ahead.
Oh no. Well, I guess one thing in the goofy thing is, like, this is an extremely 1984 movie, in a way that does delight me to no end. There are actually, to that point, there are 2 specific on-camera Valley Girl references. There is a poster and there is a record of the soundtrack, both visible in the film. But there's also, just like the skeevy projectionist that Regina is sleeping with. He's selling this bootleg copy of It Came from Outer Space on film. And they've got like posters for The Who's Tommy up in the El Rey lobby, and it's just like all the things that make it feel very 84. Just it's a warm bath to me.
And it's we haven't even touched on, shockingly, because I imagine it's probably one of the highest priorities they had when they made it. This movie has a very omnipresent soundtrack. It has a sort of American Graffiti-esque thing where everywhere they go they're hearing the same radio broadcast, and also American Graffiti-esque in that when they get to the radio station, which happens fairly early on, to determine what's going on with this radio broadcast, they determine that it is a pre-recorded DJ, so that they thought they were going to find this person and they were going to find help and sustenance, but he is in fact merely a voice on an LP. But there's a ton of songs in this movie. They spent a ton of money on it. That was clearly one of the things they were like focused on, because again, they didn't have a lot of budget here, so what they were spending money on sort of reveals their priorities. And again, it's teensploitation. It is a post Valley Girl movie. It is a 1984 movie for, Los Angeles adolescents. So they really did go all in on this kind of soundscape of what I imagine were the hits the kids listened to in 1984 that didn't really become canonical in any way post 1984.
Maybe I don't know, because there's definitely, so the two songs that stand out the most to me, there's the opening song that underscores all of the gathered parties in the streets, that I believe to be an original song that's meant to feel like it's a contemporary song.
Okay.
It's called "The Whole World Is Celebrating," and that song's kind of pleasant. And then there's, of course, the big needle drop of, it's a cover version, but they do "Girls Just Want to Have Fun."
Yes, and it is both. I mean, I think that speaks to where the movie lives. They have Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and it's a big deal, and it's one of the only songs that, like, the movie stops to make room for that song. Mm-hmm. But it is a cover version, and boy, was I traipsing through the oral uncanny valley as I was listening to it.
It's upsetting. But yeah, I just love Cyndi Lauper so much. It's just not. It's just not it.
I had multiple conversations about Cyndi Lauper the day that I watched this movie, because I have multiple conversations about Cyndi Lauper many days, frankly.
See, and this is why I'm okay with you being the only person I talk to. But yeah, no, so that's a little weird. But yeah, shit.
But like, it's weird, but like, I get it.
Yeah, of course.
Like they're not going to afford the master. That's fine. It does create this kind of interestingly like ersatz quality that I think actually is part and parcel of what the movie is doing. So I don't even mind. I wish they'd tried a little bit less hard to get a sound alike, because it would have felt a little bit less weird to me, I think, if they had.
Yeah, no, you're right. It because they pushed it so close. Because at first you're like, oh yeah, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, if they just got like some rich baritone male voice to sing "Girls Don't Want to Have Fun," it would have been a lot less confusing to me, I think is what I'm trying to say.
I don't think that would have been the right choice, maybe, but I see where you're coming from. Well, anyway, so speaking of the movie posters in the El Rey, there is a poster for, oh god, is it? I think it's a Clark Gable movie, but it's called Red Dust.
Red Dust. Yes, it's a Clark Gable, Jean Harlow film. Great picture.
Yeah, but that was a fun little wink there.
And by this point, we've already seen that they turn into Red Dust, so it's like not even a very subtle wink, but like I dug it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of the thing that the movie's doing. I would say, okay, for me, we haven't really talked about the movie's construction at all, and I think I'd like to kick that off in the terms, or I mean, like, what it looks like.
It looks so good.
Yes, it really does.
I seeded this in a while back. I said I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Do you want to, because you introduced it, do you want to talk about it?
Yes, but I literally forgot the one thing I was going to bring up before I transitioned, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to hop back 1 second and then get back into this. Because you were talking about the radio station that's constantly playing. I think the biggest Christmas moment that is doing something eerie and good is there is an empty car parked on the street that is playing all the Christmas hits because the radio is still on.
That's right, yeah.
So it's this kind of echoey, empty, cheery, very creepy scene that gets visited twice.
That's fair. That's a good point. That's a good call.
But yeah, so there's that. But then going to the images, I think the image that is, I think, maybe doing the most for the movie in the way that the Burbank line does it for the script. It's when Kelly Maroney is practicing shooting, and her sister with her big feathered hair, they're both wearing their Valley Girl outfits. She's just casually covering her ear with one hand while she's practicing the gun next to her. Mm-hmm. And I think that just very much evokes the thing that this movie is doing.
I think that's a great image. I remember it very vividly. That scene is a good scene.
It's a great scene, yeah.
By the way. It has an absolutely terrific ad-lib by Kelly Maroney.
Oh, uh-huh.
About the Uzi.
Yes. Where she's like, the gun jams, and she's like, Daddy would have gotten us Uzis.
That also, to me, is so wildly particular to that's the kind of people they are.
Yes.
But that's like, I loved it. I loved it a lot. For me, the defining aspect of this film's style. Again, you work with what you've got. You don't have a lot of money, so you find one trick that you can really extract all you possibly can out of it. So much of this movie, almost all of its exteriors, have been shot with a graduated filter, where it is like the sort of blood orange color at the top, and it is clear on the bottom, and it transitions between those two, and they slap that filter on the lens, and they give the movie these horrifying blood red skies, and it worked for me in every single shot.
Oh yeah,
because it's such an extreme color, and it is nothing about it is natural. The color itself is not natural. The way it's kind of been like enforced upon the film does not feel subtle and organic. Like, this isn't let's tweak the sky to make it red. This is just like, let's just puke red.
Yeah.
You know, let's just like, we're just going to piss red all over this movie. And I thought it worked so incredibly well. Again, super lo-fi trick. You get an entire movie's worth out of post-apocalyptic sunsets with one lens or one little filter that you slap on the lens.
Well, yeah, and well, that's the thing that does make magic when you're watching this kind of movie.
Exactly, and it works, and it creates this uncanny mood and this really threatening mood, and that's really what the film has to land. It's one thing to have like these empty shots of Los Angeles streets, like that's already weird, it's uncanny, we don't like it, it feels wrong. When you have then just bathed them all in this red, there's just such an ominous feeling, and that's really what I think is cool about this movie. It's like this silly, campy story with this very deliberately satiric edge, but it is also actually a horror film.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of why it has this just completely overwhelming horror atmosphere, like from start to finish.
Yeah, it and that's just the mystifying thing about this movie is that it can be all of those things, and it does so gleefully and voraciously, and as if it's not a problem. They're like, oh yeah, we got this. We can be incredibly bleak and harrowing, but also like really over the top, goofy, teased hair, 80s, just froth, and just kind of running the gamut between those two things as often as possible. It's like, yeah, so we're both, they do make a joke about the sky that it looks like it's really smoggy because of LA.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the sky has looked like that before in LA. But also it does have that just uncanny wrongness to it. And they're having their cake and eating it too. They're just doing these two tones that don't work together, and yet they mostly do. Like they shouldn't. Do. But I did hear you might have a qualm with the final scene of the movie, so maybe we should crack that.
I think it would be worth doing. And I would like to get a running jump into the final scene, which is to say, you know, there are, as we've been talking about, there's so many tendrils. To just recap, there is sense of the apocalypse, gloomy, doomy, horrible. There is really deliberate character drama, right? Like, it's taking these sort of easy pop culture punchlines of Valley Girls, and it is making them characters.
Yes.
And there's also a pretty unmistakable line of satire, and when I say it's pretty unmistakable, I mean it's the kind of satire where we at one point hear the villains say something like, "Look at all of these stores. It's like a something of consumerism." I forget exactly what the word is.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but yeah, exactly.
So we have a very blunt, again, Romero-esque. They're doing the same kind of satire Romero is doing in Dawn of the Dead, of like, people are so obsessed with consumption in our fallen modern America that they'll continue to be obsessed with consumption even in the face of the apocalypse, when there is no more meaning. Money doesn't even exist anymore. People will still be arguing about, like, well, do you have a credit card? How are you going to pay for this all? And the final scene, to me, is wrapped up in that satirical project that the film is doing. And I think the satire is pretty consistently the thing that the film is worst at, for me. And that's even setting aside getting to the final scene. I just think in general the satire feels a little bit too broad to me.
Yeah, no, I get that, because, like, I think the mall scene is fun, but I also don't think it's very effective satire, because it's really just, it's not that the girls' priority is to go to the mall, because they do this on, like, day 3 of the apocalypse. They're just blowing off steam at that point, which is something that feels really reasonable. And because they're really well-shaded characters, they're maybe too shaded for that satire, that specific consumerism satire to land.
And the consumerism satire is only part of it. There's also like a sort of in general like we've talked a little bit about the shadowy cabal, but there's also very clearly like the shadowy cabal is kind of worked into this like olds versus youngs, and it's very clearly taking the sides of the youngs because it is a teensploitation film. And I don't feel like that really lands for me. But so we get to this final scene where the other sister, the square sister, not square, but like the more,
Regina,
the more sort of grounded Regina, thank you, I couldn't remember her name. Regina and Hector and these 2 kids that they have saved from the
underground lab.
shadowy cabal, the underground lab. Which, boy, that's a good sequence when the scientists are going to kill the kids. That is another moment that's just super, super bleak.
Oh, yeah, it's like, you're going to wake up and see Santa? In the
Santa.
Another
Good,
Christmas moment.
Good God. Exactly. No, so the 4 of them have sort of formed a nuclear family unit.
Yeah.
And Regina and Hector are now wearing, like, preposterously conservative clothes. Like, she's wearing a neck-to-ankle, like, Little House on the Prairie dress, basically, in this scene.
Yeah, it looks like they're dressed up for Easter.
It does, because he's wearing, like, nice dinner clothes.
Yeah.
Like, it's very strange. So they're gonna form this kind of, like, unit, and there's this bit where, like, she's insisting, no, we can't cross the street. We need to wait for the lights to change. And that's used in the form of a gag. And the whole thing is clearly this, like, even post-apocalyptic, like, even after society is dead, there still will be this weird force pushing us to create, like, this kind of glowing beatific conservative version of what the family should be. And again, it's the whole thing is a very like anti-Reagan culture satire. So I'm sure the point here is like, isn't it ridiculous that these people would want to like form this kind of square conservative family unit in the post-apocalypse? And it's like, it is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that I don't know how it grows out of their characters at all.
Yeah.
And that's what really ruins the scene for me.
Yeah, that doesn't really make any sense. And the thing about the crossing the street gag, like it's a funny gag. But it does remind me of how little work this movie has done to consider how these people might continue to survive the apocalypse. Like, how are they going to eat? How are they going to live? And a lot of these things that you don't need to think about for the movie, but I think this scene kind of draws you too close to having to look at that.
In a weird way, I wasn't thinking about it in those specific terms, but I agree with you, because when the guy who is driving the car, which apparently Tom Eberhardt, the writer-director, put that character into the movie because a lot of people were asking him about the mysterious DMK who beat Regina's score on the arcade game very early in the film, and he had no intention of paying that off. But then, so it turns out to be this kid who's driving this car. So when he's driving,
I love that payoff.
That's fair. I don't love it. I don't not love it. It to me is a sort of, it's bread. It's just there to hold the meat. I very much had the thought of like, where does his gas come from? Like,
oh yeah,
are there still gas stations? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and Hector drove his truck to and from San Diego during this film.
That's
too.
Also true. I hadn't thought about it then, but yeah, it's definitely a scene that sort of feels like it's putting undue burden on my suspension of disbelief at that point.
Yeah, it's. I mean, well, especially the DMK thing. It is fully a gag, but yeah, just the fact that there is an epilogue where they are trying to a little bit kind of recapture something of society. It's too. It does kind of force you to examine that a little more in a way that it can't hold
It can't hold support entirely. And And it's not even just the fact of it. It's not just like that there are clusters of people trying to insist, no, civilization is still going on. I don't buy that Regina and Hector would be the people doing that specifically.
Yeah.
It feels like it's untrue to the characters. And even if I bought that, I would not buy the dress they put her in.
No.
Like, the dress they put her in is just it is not a good comic choice at all to me.
The way that I square that in my head is that I think maybe it's Christmas when they're doing this, and they're doing, because she's like taking pictures of them, and it feels like a holiday atmosphere in some way. I mean, like I said, they're dressed for Easter.
Right.
But that's the thing, is like maybe they're just trying to do something special for this day.
I can see that as a justification, and I can even see it being made to work if while they are doing this, they are perhaps standing in front of one of those large civic Christmas trees that puts up in the middle of town square.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it just doesn't work. It's like it could,
yeah.
but it doesn't.
No, like I felt my excitement for the movie getting like actually punctured by that last scene, because it's like, oh, this just isn't landing to me. It's not. Nothing about the final scene to me worked. The DMK thing is cute. I think that Kelly Maroney is still playing it very well at this point. Mm-hmm. But the final scene for me was just a real... If it had just cut to credits at the end of the preceding scene, it would have felt weirdly unfulfilled, but I would have been like, oh, well, that's how horror movies be. They wrap up their plot and then they stop.
Yeah, and they could have driven off into the sunset, and it's like, what do we do now? And it's like, whatever we want. Or, exactly. Whatever. It's not that hard. But
so that's where I am with the final scene.
Yeah, that is a bummer. But overall, I mean, this is a movie that I love, and I'm glad that you enjoyed watching it for the first time.
I sure did enjoy it. I've heard good things about it, almost exclusively good things. I think it holds up to the good things. I don't think it's perfect. I certainly wouldn't I wouldn't say that I love it, but I liked it a lot.
And I think that's entirely fair. Do you think, okay, say in 2 years somebody's like, hey, want to watch Night of the Comet with me? Do you think you'd do it?
I think in 3 years I would.
Fair
I think
enough.
In 2 years I might need another year.
That is fair. I usually take
it depends,
7 years between movies.
Fair enough. It depends on how much my continued journey through Star Trek Voyager makes me want to never see Robert Beltran's face. I think it's a big part of it.
Okay. Is he an annoying character?
The character is god-awful.
Got
He
it.
is not bad as the character, but in part... You are written a character whose thing is to be god-awful, and you play it well that means you're being god-awful.
Yep.
So...
Exactly. Okay, anything else about the movie while we're here?
I don't really think so. I managed to squeeze in right there at the last minute that the Santa scene is really terrifying, and I like that scene a lot. So I think that does me.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and you know, that's the Christmas thing. The Christmas thread is threaded very much into the bleak apocalypse thread, and I think that, you know, good work, Patreons, for picking this movie. I think it's...
Agreed. Good work, us, for nominating this
Exactly.
movie as well.
We're all great today. We'll see if that continues, because we will be returning in 2 weeks with a film set on Christmas Eve. It is the French film from 2007, Inside. Another one you have not seen, right?
Not seen. Really had not even heard of until you suggested it as a nominee for this category.
Okay, I'm so excited. I want you to go in as blind as possible, and we'll just see what happens. Make sure it's the 2007 one. Blumhouse remade it in English, and I don't even know how that worked because nobody saw it, and I'm glad about it. But yeah, that's a movie that I do like to revisit every couple of years, and my time has come, and I'm really excited to chat about that with you.
All right, excellent. I look forward to it. We'll do this again in 2 weeks, everybody.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's a joke in my brain that isn't forming, so I'm just going to end the podcast. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. You can find more of this podcast and both of our reviews at alternateending.com. Bye, everybody.